Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of our GP3D RC10GX89 build video. So in part 1, which is very long, we went through right from the start, a bit of the history about the 89 worlds and the history of the conversion kit that I've created, and then went through the full build of pretty much the basic kit that you get as the conversion, as well as a few extra bits around the gearbox and motor plate area. And we'll look at all the other optional parts, or not really optional, but additional parts, I should say, such as the bell cranks, turnbuckles, the axles, some of the uprights, as well as the shocks. So I haven't got the front uprights or steering blocks for this build, but they're just standard RC10 parts or more recent replica parts as desired. But we'll have most of the other bits to get the sort of sliding chassis done in the rest of this show. So let's get stuck straight into it, and we'll just recap briefly where we were up to last time, and then we'll get stuck into the rest of the build. So here we were, this is where we got to. So this is the full conversion kit build, with the additional inclusion of the gears. Gearbox casing comes with the kit, but all the internals and the slipper is the fan RC components that we installed and built, and also the Gaza Motorsport motor plate and motor guard that are exact replicas of the originals, so you can use originals or other aftermarket ones as desired. So yeah, that's where we are. So now we'll probably get stuck into the steering bell crank first at the front, and to do that we'll take the top deck back off, because it makes it a lot easier to access, tightening up the bolts and the nut for the bell cranks. So these front two are the longer 3/8 buttons. All the other screws on here are the 1/4 inch buttons. So we'll keep them organized. So just slide the top deck forward so it comes out from under the rear tower, and then lift it up. Just set that up there for the moment. Cool. So now we can get to the turnbuckle area nice and easily. Not turnbuckle, the bell crank area nice and easily. So got these parts here. These long, I think they're 7/8, 8/32 bolts with the 100-degree head. Very hard to find, so luckily I've still got 4 left from the batch I bought a few years ago. So they're quite easy to find with different shaped heads. So I think it's an 80 or an 82 degree is kind of the standard. The 100 degree sort of flatter angle countersunk head with the Phillips and with the 7/8 inch length is yeah, quite hard to source. So if you do find them, please tell me. But yeah, I've got a couple of them luckily for this. So yeah, so I do have this as an optional little set. So it just comes with the plastic bell cranks, little bearing inserts, and optionally the 1/4 inch inside diameter bearings. So 3/8 inch outside diameter and 1/4 inch inside. So these are the same sort of bearings that you would use on the rear uprights if you're using the 1/4 inch axles. Like the very early RC10 came with 1/4 inch axles, which then tapered down to where the thread section is. And then later on they went to the 3/16 diameter axles, which are generally the axle shaft is the same diameter all the way up to the thread, doesn't taper. So that's how you can tell the difference without measuring them. So yeah, so I've got these guys, and then we'll need some nuts as well. So just need 2 of them. We'll need some 8/32. So we'll use just some normal flat nuts for mounting them to the chassis. And we've got a couple of the 8/32 nylocks. You could also use the plastic nuts that Associated used to do. These metal nylocks represent or replicate what Masaki had used on his build. So we'll go with them. So we'll use a bit of Loctite on these first flat nuts, so as to make sure they don't come loose, especially when we're screwing the nylock on top later on. Might actually work better if we put the Loctite on the base of the thread here, where the nut's going to rest. If you haven't got the giant 11/32 nut driver, just grab these with pliers or a clamp or something. Just be careful, try not to scratch the carbon. Okay, so they've gone there. So these little plastic what do you call them? Not really inserts, kind of inserts, or yeah, bearing inserts. Don't know what's a good name for them. Just they have a very lightly sort of thread onto the bolts, so you don't need any real force or pressure. Just finger tight or finger pressure to turn them onto the bolt. And then you'll see these bearings will pop on over those nicely. So yeah, with the bell cranks, we'll pre-prepare these with some ball studs. So I showed these in the last episode, the ball studs from Dragon Punch RC. So we've got all of our shock oils and building equipment here for next step. We'll do the shocks. But yeah, for now we've got the super nice titanium replica ball studs. So how many do we need? We'll need the middle link, the outer, and the servo. And while we're about it, we'll grab the also super cool Gazza RC GP3D turnbuckle set. So you got all these replica Lunsford turnbuckles, but there's also a not turnbuckle, which is a very simple little bit of threaded rod, so very tiny. I think it was 1/2 inch or something. So we use that to be the middle link. So I'll put the rest of those turnbuckles there for later. Everybody loves building turnbuckles, so we'll get stuck into that later. So we've got the Fan RC ball cups, so Replica RC10 white ball cups, and these are really good. So they're almost exact replica, and I've been using them for the whole time for racing these things, and they work really well. So don't wear out too fast, don't pop off too easily, so it's really good. So I'll just put them there, nice little pile. But for starters, we will see if we can thread one of these puppies up. So this is just a bit of threaded rod, so it's not a turnbuckle or anything. If we can probably just pinch the middle with, just gently, with a pair of pliers, just so we can get the thread about 1/2 into each side. And you thread the other side up, so they touch, basically, so that you can't see any threaded rod anymore. Just thread them so they touch. So you can fine tune that. I think that should make them line up, but you can fine tune the length of the middle link, of course, to make your bell crank sit flush. So I'll find our lonely 2mm metric wrench for this build. It hasn't been used much, but it can be used for these. The original bell cranks had little, for the servo link, had little tiny pilot holes that you could sort of drill out to the desired size to then tap for your type of ball stud, because I think back then a lot of the servo link ball studs were a bit smaller, or they used a wire with a Z band and all sorts of different things like that. So I remember the holes were pretty small. So in here I've got like a sort of a fake replica hole on the outside, and then a larger hole ready to have these thread into as the sort of inner hole as such, but that's the correct position to use. So then the little pilot hole outside just gives you that extra replica feeling. Cool, so you need to pull them up. As always, don't over tighten. Now, the bearings. So these, you'll need to probably press down onto should have done this first. press down onto a hard surface. That was brilliant. Put the bearings in first as a hot tip. So I need to press these down to make sure that they sort of seat flush pretty much into the surface of the plastic. So you see there's a little indent for even the flange of these flange bearings. So yeah, see, it's nice and flush, so make sure that's fully in. It's like a firm press fit. This one's being a bit more tricky. So we'll just get the scalpel. I'll just sort of shave a very tiny amount off the sort of edges, just so it can sort of get started in there. Let's see if that lets it slide in a bit easier. Yep, there we go. Beautiful. So top and bottom flush both sides. And now, so with this middle link, we want it to be the same distance as the posts are apart. I should remember that distance, but it is, what's that, 27? It's about 27 or 27.5 mil. So we want to make this about the same. So it's actually a bit too short, so I'll actually wind that out of the fraction. No, a couple of threads, not too much. Pretty close. How does that compare? Yep. That looks the same. What's that measure at? Center to center is 27 point something, 27.3.5, around about there. So that looks good. So also just to note, I used all the short ball studs. In the bell cranks. So I think we've got one more for the servo horn side. And we've got two more short ones, which will probably eventually go onto the steering bell cranks, steering blocks. So the arm of the steering block will have the short ones. Or you could have long ones there with nuts at the bottom. What else have we got? Top camber ones. Maybe use those for the camber. Oh, actually, yeah, I think we'll use the short ones for the camber, and then you can have a small 440 nut on the other side. Yep, that'll be the go there. And then all the rest of the long ones, so you got long ones for the steering block. You'd have probably a nut to retain them as well, to make sure they don't loosen off. And then you've got you got the outer camber, same thing on the upright. And then you've got the last two ones for the rear upright, top of the rear upright. And we've already put the two ball studs into the bulkhead at the back. Okay, let's pop this on. You also see the way I've designed and printed these sort of pseudo replica bell cranks is the inner sort of ear that was on the originals has been chopped off. So again, like to replicate the stealth cars and the Masaki car, they cut those off for the originals. So it's kind of pre-cut in the design for these. So I think pop these on first is usually the easiest because they're a bit hard to get to once the bell cranks are in the car. So if you put them on first, and then we should be able to angle them slightly, so we can put them over the posts and angle it slightly so it doesn't interfere, or so that the shock tower doesn't get in the way, and then just sort of push them down over those plastic inserts, and then we've got see that there, got a beautiful little bell crank system. Yep. And then on top we'll put these big 8/32 nylocks. So no Loctite needed there, of course, because they're nylock. And then I think the good old associated shock wrench slash the 11/32 nut driver size for these 8/32 nuts. You can use that, or if you've got a proper driver tool. So do these, I think you should be able to just crank these down, but just double check that it doesn't jam their movement. They'll be pretty much, if you have 7/8 inch 8/32 bolts to hold it, it'll be pretty much flush, but yeah, screw it down, they'll pretty much seat onto that little plastic insert part. Don't crank it really hard because it'll start to crush it, but you just until you get the resistance of it stopping. That'll be good. So that stops your up and down play, and also still lets the bearings work properly, and you get a super awesome, smooth and slop-free bell crank system. Cool, so that's good. So we'll leave that there at that point. The steering links can be popped on reasonably easy later on. So we'll pop the top deck back onto the car. Don't think we need to do anything else. So if you're installing your servo, back then it was just double-sided tape, so I did the same thing, which I was skeptical about, but I used the good quality Tees double-sided tape, similar to what I showed you in the previous episode, to just tack these little side mounts down. But it is really good double-sided, very thin, 0.2 of a millimeter, and make sure you clean the carbon surface and the surface of the servo really well, ideally with an electrical cleaner. If not, then brake cleaner. And then I use that Tees tape, so it's quite thin, it's only about 10 mil wide, I think, so you can put that all across the bottom of the servo. And then once I'd probably recommend wait until the end. It's a bit harder to get under the top deck, but it's easy to sort of slide it in from the side, and then you can position the arm, the horn, to go in between this or go into this gap in the top plate. It's quite tight, especially at the back section. So you need to sort of be careful and play around with positioning your servo and the servo horn, so that it clears all of that and still gets you enough travel. You don't need a lot of travel with this. The actual servo movement travel won't be that much, but you do need to make sure you position your servo carefully to make sure that you can get the movement both directions required, and that the little link between the servo and the bell crank doesn't scrape or hit this part of the top deck as well. So it'll be close, but you need to make sure it just misses. So your horn can't be too long. You need a sort of medium or short length servo horn. So yeah, all good fun there. But for now, so I'm not going to put a servo in for the rest of this build video. But yeah, that's probably time to do it is after you put the top deck back on, and then any time after that. So you can make sure that it clears the top deck. Of course. Cool. So we'll pop that back in place. Okay, remember to leave all of these a little bit loose initially until they're all in, and then once they're all in, everything's lined up, we can tighten them down and make sure the whole structure is nice and flat. Let's see here, I've got the, I'll push those hinge pins forward so the chassis can sit nice and flat while I do the final tightening. Okay, nice. Now, next, everyone's favourite, turnbuckles. Okay, let's attack these turnbuckles. They are very cool ones, so makes it a bit more enjoyable. Okay, what have we got here? So they're mega long, because they're a long-armed, prototype car. Inner hinge pins are very far in. So I've got the two longest ones are the two steering rods, and then the next two longest are the front camber, and then the next two are the rear camber. So the nut on them is a 1/4 inch nut, so I use this super cute little, was it Stanley spanner from the hardware store, 1/4 inch. And I made this little dodgy tool just to hold the ball end. So lots of things like this exist in the market. The thread on the nut end is the normal thread, and the other end is the reverse thread. So we can hold it into the nut like that and thread them on. So it doesn't need to thread all the way. I'll probably go in a few mil. And so remember, this end is the reverse. So it's like you're undoing it, but it's actually doing it up. Yeah, so probably going to each, like, so 3 or 4 mil to start with, that's enough. And then the rest of the adjustment obviously you do on the car when it's all sort of complete. And really with, you want to do it at race ready ride height and everything. Final adjustment, you can probably do an initial adjustment to get you in the ballpark before then. But yeah, ideally you have it all with your normal wheels and tyres and shocks and ride height all set. And then you can finally set your cambers and tow. Yes, I made this really basic little tool ages ago. So one end I've got the hole so it fits these RC10 style ball cups nicely, and the other end I've got a larger hole that fits the more modern ball ends. I know there's all different sizes out there that this won't work for, but if I come across them I would just make another version of this with different sizes. But yeah, this has those two sizes that I've been mostly using recently. Yep, let's reverse. Cool. Okay, so they're done. So I've got the two spare ones there for the servo link. I'll pop them over there with their buddies for later. So yeah, so once they're all on, everything would use that spanner to adjust it, of course. But for now, we've got these guys. So I don't have the front parts with me for this build, but they're all standard. So we'll have to just pretend. So for now, let's just I'll pop the two ball studs in the tower. Probably be best to do this before it's installed. We've got our long ones. Trying to decide if to use the long ball studs for the steering. I want the long ones in there so you can, for the steering arm, knuckle arm. You want to use the long ball stud in that so you can shim it up for the bump steer setting and have a little nut on the other side. So I'll definitely keep the long ones for that, and I'll use the short ones in the tower here. And then we need to find a little nut. So I could use a flat nut or a lock nut. The original Masami Replica had, I think you used Yokomo. It was like a completely different ball and ball end at this inner camber link end. So yeah, Masaki actually used I think it was a Yokomo, don't know, maybe a 5.8mm ball or something a bit bigger. Oh sorry, a bit bigger than these 440 size ones. And then he used a screw that went inside the ball on the other side of the tower. So yeah, quite different, but I have those on my Masami replica here, but I think the rest of the associated team drivers used the associated parts. So let's use a flat nut because there's not much thread that sticks out for the lock nut part. So I reckon we'll use just the flat nut and a bit of Loctite. Bit more low profile. So I've got a couple of the flat nuts there. Give our trusty friend Mr. Loctite. Yeah, so you can pop these in as you're assembling the tower in the first place onto the bulkhead if you think ahead that well. But it's not too hard to put it on now. He says, when realizing that it might be tricky to get to that ball stud, let's see. Whoa, just get to it. Yeah, I would definitely recommend putting these onto the tower first. Whoa, tight fit. Go old school with the pliers. Be very careful so it doesn't slip. So I'll nip that up. Oh, love the old school style without all the proper tools. Just use your pliers. Not recommended. And last time. Okay, you didn't see that. Awesome. So that's that bit. So at the rear, yes, I've got these, as I said in the previous episode, I've got these replica uprights, and I also have some more beefed up ones. So if you ever need replacements that are a bit beefier than the originals or these replicas or anything else, send me a message. But there's plenty of these uprights I think available on the market these days. AE and Fan and JC and probably others. J Concepts maybe. Get rid of the print material. Yeah, so that sort of print material comes off quite easily. You just squish it with some pliers usually and work it off, and it cracks away. So we'll just clean up the rough edges. Yeah, so this top section where the hole is for the ball is quite a weak point in these. There's not much material. It's just not really quite strong enough to last forever. So that's where I have the beefed up version, which makes the width this much thicker. So at the sort of a glance at them, you don't even notice they're different. If you look closely, you can see that they're thicker, but they still give a nice aesthetic effect where it looks basically like it used to be. because it will stop those extra DNFs, which is always nice. But yeah, I do sort of recommend if you can use originals or other aftermarket ones for this part specifically, it's much better. And there was nothing unique about this part in the Masami car or in the Stealth cars. They just used the normal production part. So there's nothing special about this one. Okay, what do we need here? Let's assemble all this rear parts. We've got the cam links there, so we'll come back to them. We've got these sort of TH1 style inspired wheel adapters. So we can bolt on the 2-screw Yokomo type wheels. And these ones are specific for the 3/16 axles. So what do we need? So we need some bearings, and we need the CVDs. So there's a few CVDs around now that are the right sort of length. They do need to be a very specific length so they don't pop out of the outdrives in the RC10. So Fan RC does these CVD style. JC Racing Products in the UK has a UJ version, so universal joint version, which more closely replicate the originals. So the original 89 car had effectively UJ joints, so they look very good. They're an excellent replica of the originals. Something that may perform a little bit better. I don't know if there's really much difference in running these sort of things. You're not going to notice the fine tuning of a universal. Of a CVD versus a universal. So anyway, I've got these. I've used the JC UK ones, UJs a lot, and I've used these Fan RC ones as well, and both do the job very nicely. So we've got those puppies. We need a few bearings. So we need 4 of these bearings. Pop them back. So the other 4 would be for the front wheels. Cool. So I'll just run the scalpel lightly around the edges of these just to clean them up. So the bearings will seat in. Okay, what have we got here? Sometimes these can be a real pain, sometimes they're super easy. So we've got like a little split pin, and I think by the look of it they will probably press in there quite easily. So it's like a spring loaded fit, so they don't fall out. But some of the early JC ones, for the 1/4-inch axles, the hole was a bit too small. I had to drill it out, but he fixed that pretty quickly. That was a long time ago. And then the 3/16 ones have always been pretty good for both the JC and the Fan RC ones. So let's see how we go with that. And the other thing is the spacing, which is interesting because I don't know if I've got appropriate spaces for these. Might have to go to my magic bag of spaces again. Let's see where it ends up. So make sure the bearings are fully seated. Oh, I might need to trim this a bit. That is rubbing slightly. Yeah, I will. So the larger CVD. So these are good for the universals. The quite large diameter CVD, it's almost dislodged the retaining ring there. Oh, actually, I'll show you another little trick. Oh, not, I don't know if it's a trick or not. It's just a random thing I do, which is for cleaning, rebuilding CVDs or brand new ones. I like to coat them with some chain lube. So, don't know, got this one, super clean chain lube. So this stuff tends to put a bit of a coating on the metal parts. I think if you put them on when they're hot, it might be even better, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, it gives a bit of a lubrication coating on the parts, and it tends not to attract the dirt too much like grease does. So I'm sure there's a million ways and different products to build the CVDs, but this is what I usually do. Tell me if you think it's stupid or there's a better way. I'm sure there's a better way, but this is what I do. So should I be lazy or not lazy? I think I'll be lazy. You can take them apart and coat all apart separately, but I'll just spray it in there. It's kind of pretty liquid when it goes on. Just work it around in there and just wipe off the excess from the outside. And it's kind of dry as it takes a number of minutes to dry or whatever, but it doesn't really matter because we're not about to run it immediately, funnily enough. So yeah, so I usually just do that with my CVDs. Yeah, because the worst thing is if you put some sort of sticky lubricant or grease on them, just attracts all the grit, and then it wears them, seems to wear them a lot faster that way. So that stuff is quite good at not attracting the dirt generally. Okay, so let's see what we've got. So I'll just use a reamer gently, just because this is the bottom flat surface where it gets printed, and sometimes that can be a bit squished. So just clean up the entrance to that hole with the reamer, and then also just clean up the actual hole itself. If you've got a 3/16 drill bit, you could run that through. Make sure it's the same as the axle size, but this is a dodgier way to do it. So I don't want to take too much out because it's sort of deliberately slightly undersized. Don't want any slop in this. Yeah, that's good. So it doesn't really need to be enlarged, the hole, just need to clean up the print, clean up the edges slightly. That's about it. So that just slides on like a sort of press fit. So yeah, so I've got a slightly dodgy shim there, and then the pin. So let's see how these pins go in. Just want to try and get it just press started. Now this is the tricky bit. Putting this into a vise is the best way to do it, which I don't have handy. So yeah, it presses in pretty easily. So I'm going to use the dodgy style method. So here we need to so I press it right in so it's coming out to the other side. Now I need to offset the pliers a fraction and try and press in. So this is where the vise would work extremely well. And look away now, kiddies, because this method is not very good. Okay, that's about halfway. that on. So now need to be very careful here to check what thread these guys use, whether it's imperial or metric. So I'll just thread this normal nut. Yeah, so that's imperial, so it's 8/32 thread. So all good. I can grab get a couple of lock nuts. And try and tighten this down. These are notoriously tricky. Might actually put it on backwards because the way they design these TH1 adapters, it doesn't give you much room to get the driver in. It works well with the new metric nuts, like a 7mm M4 nut, but it doesn't actually work very well with the originals. So what I might do is I'll thread this on first. So it goes right through the nylon part and sticks out. So basically just get that thread right through, and then that might let me thread this on backwards. Obviously it's easy to cross thread these things. So I think I will need a lot more shims in there actually as well. If you've got one of those sort of flanged associated washers, you could probably use one of them. I don't think I have any spare ones of them. So I might pop out the split pin. Okay, so I think I'll put 3 or 4 shims on the, I think I'll put 3 shims on the inside. So what this also does is moves the axle bone pin further in towards into the diff outdrive to make sure it doesn't pop out. So yeah, these are quite different to the UJs, or not quite different, they're a little bit different to the UJs in some of the dimensions and lengths, so we need to get them positioned, and that'll help it clear the inside of the hub as well, actually, come to think of it. So that is much better. And we'll put 1 shim on the outside so that it can rest on the bearing race. So I've got tiny bit of play there, but not too much. So I think that's going to be good. So you want a little bit, because you don't want to bind the whole assembly and the axle and the bearings up when you crank the wheel nut. You need there to be a tiny bit of end play there so it stays nice and free in the drivetrain. These large 830 nuts are a bit tricky, so ideally I would get it on backwards, but that is proving a little bit tricky. I'll see if I can do it. So I'll put a nut in first so I can press on it, and then what's the best way to do this? Need it to be square so the threads will line up once it gets to the metal part. Oh, did it. Brilliant. Okay, so let's do it up really tight. And I've still got probably 0.3, 0.4 of play, so I reckon that's pretty perfect. So that was 3.3 shims on the inside and 1.3 shim on the outside. Now the $1 million question is finding some more. They look all different. I might have to go searching for some. So we'll do the same. We'll put 3.3 shims on the inside. Yeah, gives a good clearance. Nice. One on the outside. So I've got the spare puppy there. Okay, so I've got the two assemblies there. Now let's pop them into the car. So I've got the 29mm. Yep, to the 29mm hinge pins for the rear. And that's the 11/64, so we want the 1/8 drill bit again. I like to drill these actually after the bearings here and then are in, because otherwise the bearings kind of press in further and you've got to re-drill them anyway, so I always find it, or re-drill them and ream them. That's always a bit better to do it in that order. Now we want these to be a press fit, like interference fit in the uprights, and then we want the hinge pins to rotate in the arm, same as the other end of the arms inboard. So same sort of method. So we might need the 1/8 reamer. Let's just see. Yep, that was going to be way too tight, so I can't even get them out now. So we'll probably go through once with the reamer, should do it. Beautiful. They're symmetrical, so doesn't matter which way you go in. Let's grab our favourite awesome circlips. We'll put one on first. I did not ream this arm, so how about we put those there, clip that on. Need one more circlip. Okay, but first need to do the reaming. Again, probably better to do this before you put the arms on the car. But I obviously forgot to do the outside in the previous episode. It's easier to do that out of the car. I mean, before it's attached. Awesome. Okay, let's see how these fit. Okay, a little bit binding. almost there. Oh, nice. Okay. Pretty close. Yep, nice and free. Okay. Try and bring this one in front of the camera. Okay, just pinch it there. Make sure it's clipped right in. Awesome. Okay. So now we can pop these on. Masaki did have them in a very specific direction, so which isn't convenient. I think it was to sort of clear, make sure that the nuts didn't bind on anything. But normally the turnbuckles, you'd kind of face them the same direction, like the same thread or the nut or the flat or whatever to the same side, so that your direction of adjustment is always the same. So forwards would be tightening them, backwards towards the back of the car would be loosening them, or vice versa. So it's up to you. These ones, because they're big chunky nut and it's obviously at one end, it's super obvious which end that is, so I find it's a no-brainer when you're tightening them. It doesn't have to be all in one direction. All the modern ones are a lot more subtle, and it's a lot harder to see which way they go, so it kind of makes it a bit more convenient in the field, especially if you're sort of rushing or it's harder to see. But these ones, it's super obvious. So I'll probably pop them on the same as the way Masami had them, just for the sake of it. But this is a Halsey car or a Let car. So they probably had different turnbuckles altogether. I'll have to go check the photos again. So let's pop these on. That's to the inside as well. So the back ones, he had the nuts, both nuts facing or closest to the inside. Now this is the tricky one to get on, because it's, as you can see where we dremeled earlier, we not easy to see, where we dremeled the motor plate out to clear basically this ball cup. Does make it very tricky to pop on. What is the best way to do that? Might have to lever it, or I'll do something in there. Let's see. Let's see if I can lever it on. No, doesn't quite work. Wow, that is super tricky. So there's another tip. Probably pop these on before you put the gearbox in. Oh, there we go. Yep, that is super tricky. Okay, now we need, oh, I forgot the ball studs. So now we need some ball studs in these uprights. And I highly recommend, especially with these skinny replicas I was talking about, being not the strongest things in the universe, I highly recommend putting a nut on the back of them. That'll help a small amount to stop the sort of leverage effect of the threaded part of that ball stud going through the thin plastic. So like clamp it all together a little bit to give it a little bit more strength. There we go. Okay, make sure the outdrives are the bones are into the outdrives, of course, before you pop on the last ball of the link. Cool. Whoa, there we go, finally. Got some rear geometry happening. Cool. So yeah, so as I said, I won't be doing the front uprights in this video, but that's all standard stuff. We'll pretend. So last bit, I think. What have we got left? Shocks. That's pretty much it. There's the gear cover, of course, but you guys all know how to do that. Nothing groundbreaking there. Yeah, so I think the last bit of this epically long build video will be the shocks. So I've got the fan RC shocks here, so let's move this car aside. We're going to put that, and we'll bring the shock building items. Let's put down another bit of cloth while we make a mess. Cool. So yeah, so Fan's got these replica shocks, which are the hard coated, the grey, sort of grey green anodizing. So yeah, let's get them out of the packet. Awesome. So yes, we've got the front pair and the rear pair. So the rear pair were designated with the body length, or the size is 1.32 inches. I don't know where exactly that is measured from. Might be the inside, don't know. But yeah, 1.32. So they're the standard rear, buggy and truck shocks. And you see the anodizing colour is pretty cool. Mighty close to the originals. I think there's only a shade between them. And then the fronts are the interesting ones. So the standard front buggy shocks on the production cars were 0.71, 0.72 designation, which are quite short. The truck, when the truck came out, the RC10T, that came out with longer front shocks, and they were designated as about 1.02. So 1.31 and 0.7 roughly to one decimal. So the middle size, which is these, the 1.02, the truck fronts, and that's what was used on these stealth buggies in at the Worlds in '89. So yeah, so that's what we've got here, and you can see these kits as per the original RC10 kits. They come with the little installation tool for the and removal tool for the O-rings, because they're internally, they don't get added from the outside, they get added from the inside, which is a lot trickier or a lot less convenient. And yeah, you have this tool. So these shocks also come with one of these tools. If you haven't got an original, then no worries. The springs are probably not ideal. So they all come with these, I don't know what they are, sort of obviously silver color, but I don't know how they relate. They feel very soft. They might be similar to like the old AE greens, which I've been using on the rear of this. But these fronts actually come with the same rear length shocks, so same length spring as the rear shocks. So I don't know if they're going to be all that appropriate. They'll probably be far too, or basically too stiff at the front due to their length, and lift the front of the car too much. So yeah, probably not going to use those. Probably not going to use either of them, but we can at least build it up with them anyway for now. And also these sets come with three lots of pistons. So each pair comes with 3 piston types, which the original kits used to as well. And the difference is the hole diameter. So they're all 2-hole pistons like the originals, and the diameters were, I think, 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 mil, I believe. So this is kind of similar. I don't know if they're numbered the same, but I think the hole sizes are pretty similar. So I'll probably build it with what do you reckon, with the 1.2s all round? We'll go middle of the range and see how that goes. Okay, so yeah, the rest of it, all these spaces look pretty similar to the originals. No bleeder cap screws, of course, so the modern shocks have bleeder screws in the cap, which make them very easy to build. So these are pretty much exact replicas, and therefore don't have them, which is going to make it a little bit trickier to bleed, but not too bad. Cool. I think I said before, we've got the Yokomo style spring tensioner clips that Masaki used on his car, but I don't think we'll use them because the other drivers, American drivers in the team, I'm pretty sure they just use the clamps, so we'll pop them on. I can always swap them later if desired, but that should do. So let's get stuck in. Okay, what have we got? They look like the smallest, and the biggest, and the middle. Are they numbered? Yeah. I think, what, number 1? That's they're number 1. Which is very strange. They definitely look smaller than this. These are number 2. And then the tiniest holes is number 3. It's very pretty bizarre. So it's not what it used to be, but I'm pretty sure these number 1s are the middle size. That is very weird. 1.2 mil. They're about 1.2 something, 2.7, oh no, 2.9. That's very strange. A good thing to do is mark the numbers so you can actually read them. Especially if you're into vintage cars, means you're also old, and it's definitely hard to see those little numbers. I'm still adamant that the hole sizes don't go in the sequence of the numbers though, which is weird. We'll do the same on the rears, but let's just check these ones first. So yeah, so just a marker pen, and then when you wipe it off, there'll be a little bit of marker colour left in the engraved numbers. Cool, so now I can clearly see those. So I've got the 1s, the 2s, and the 3. But okay, so the 3 have got the smallest hole. The 2 looks like the largest hole, and the 1 looks like the middle hole. So that is completely confusing. Yep, I reckon they've definitely been marked wrong, or drilled wrong, or whatever. Okay, so effectively the number 2s are the biggest hole, number 1's the small middle hole, and number 3's the smallest hole, which might have been backwards from what was totally messed up order, but I think the associated ones might have been different, as in number 1 was the smallest hole. How bizarre. Let's see if we can confirm this. It's good to get the pistons right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so if I get number 3 hole, That's 1.3. Yeah, so the 1.3 only goes into the number 2. Man, that's confusing. Yep, number 2 goes in there, but not into the 3. And number 3 is the 1.1. Okay. Wow, that's confusing. I wonder if these are going to be the same. Holy moly. So, I'm going to put the middle hole in, so we'll ignore the numbers for now. I'm just going to go with the middle hole, which is 1.2. And on this set, it's the number 1, but let's ignore that. Not confusing at all. Okay, so that's there. Let's see if we can unconfuse the others as well. We've got number 1 and number 3. Number 2. Number 2. Number 1. 3. Yep, so these seem to be mixed up as well. So the number 1 is the middle size. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll put the middle size in all of the shocks, front and back. And let's see how that goes. See what the pistons, I mean the shafts, so yep, they definitely look like the originals as well. So the shafts are like the front truck shock size shafts, longer than the short buggy shocks, but shorter than the rears. So they look to be in proportion, which is good. And I know these shocks work really well because I've been using these on my car. I think this car here is originals, but I have used these Fan RC shocks on the 91 car, and also on this one as well at times, trying different shocks or different shock settings. Not really planning to do a full shock build tutorial or anything like that. I'm sure I'm not the best at it. Hopefully I'm okay at it. Done it a few times, but yeah, just gonna build them. I don't know if it'll confuse me in future, but I might mark these ones, because when I look at number 1 it'll tell me something different from what they actually are. That is a future problem, which I'm going to create right now. Unbelievable. Okay, and then like in general you'd put the number facing up so you can see it from the top of the shock when you rebuild them. Okay, so that's all the pistons and shafts done. You can go nuts and polish shafts and all that sort of stuff if you want. I would do it for a full-on racing car, but we'll just do this. These ones just nice and basic styles. Careful not to chop the O-rings or anything. Okay, so these big black O-rings just pop on top of the shock to seal the cap, to make sure it seats down into the bottom of the gap below the thread. Oops. Cool, so they're all seated in there. Okay, now we grab our magical tool. So I'm going to put 35 weight in the front and 30 weight in the rear of these. So we've got our oil there. Okay, so these guys, so you got the large sort of C-shaped locking washer. And then we put the small thin plastic washer, O-ring, large plastic washer, O-ring, and a small plastic washer. So the small plastic washers on the sort of outside of each O-ring, then the large thick plastic washer in the middle, same as the original buggy. And then we'll coat that with oil. And now insert it in, so need to make sure that it clicks. So you see that the little tip of the plastic tool will just protrude when it stops, but then we need to give it a bit of force and it'll click. Hear that? So that was the nice click. So you've got to make sure that happens, otherwise it's not seated, and you always double check if you can see to make sure that the washer is fully locked in and seated. And when you remove them, you push the tool in from the other end, and the little so the angled cut and the angled point is used to like dislodge that locking C washer. So I always just put really low pressure, but just give it a little push, and that popped out. That is awesome. So that is pretty funny. It shows that it wasn't seated properly. So how about I try that again? I can show you like the disassembly. So then if you're trying to push all the washers out, you want to catch that corner on the bottom plastic spacer, and then it'll pretty much push everything out. Make sure I haven't lost anything, so that's all good. So yeah, so you can see that hasn't seated the plastic, this plastic C washer, which is critical. So let's try that again and see if I can not launch it out of the shock this time. Oh, there we go. That was a bit bigger click. That sounds better. So now it's sticking out. How far is that? Sticks out almost 3 millimeters, about 2.7 mil on this one. So yeah, so push really hard, no extra click. So that looks good. So now let's see if my magical trick there we go. I'll put my finger over the shock this time. Yep, so if I just put a little bit of pressure on the end washer, yep, that's not going anywhere now. So that's good. Cool, so we just rinse and repeat. Cool. Okay. I'll pop a bit of oil in so it lubricates the first time you push the shaft through. I'll fill these puppies up while we're about it, and then we'll do the rears. spill it everywhere. Okay, so that's the 35 for the fronts. Put them there. And we'll just push the piston up slowly once, or a couple of times, just to get the air, like the air bubble out from under the piston basically. Okay, so now I'll put 30 weight in the back. Cool. Well, hair's looking good. Sticking up everywhere. Actually, here's a key item that you need to do. So before I put that shaft in the shafts in the rear shocks, these fan RC ones don't actually come with the parts, but you need to put 3 spaces. I think it's about 3 mil each, 3.5 mil each. In each shock has down travel limiters, so you need to put the spacers onto the shock shaft. I think they used to be about maybe 1/8 inch thickness. So I'll go back to my magical pack of spacers and see if I can find some. Okay, so here's some bunch of spacers that I made. A couple of different sizes. I think it was about 1/8 and 1/16, so close to 3 mil and 1.5 mil. So 3 of the larger ones, 3 of the 3 mil, so about 9 mil in total inside each shock. And also I found at the same time some front blue truck. Oh, you see them? Some front blue truck springs. that might be a bit firm, but they're definitely shorter. So you can see the big difference there between the rear length and the truck front shock length or spring length. So just for fun, I might build it with these. Probably be a bit too firm for the track, but you never know. Okay, let's get some of these magical spaces. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you see these half ones. Not going to use them, but I guess if you wanted to fine tune the droop was the theory, you could use those puppies. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, so these spaces don't come with these fan RC shocks, so you need to find them or make them or whatever, or find the originals would be ideal. But yeah, so these, I'll just double check the measurement for reference. Yeah, it's about 9.15, so just over 9 mil. So it's, I think I was probably going for about 3 mil or 1/8 thickness. So yeah, so you'd start with about 9 mil spacing inside the shock, and that'll get you pretty close, if not spot on. So, and the other trick is to make sure you don't drop them off. Make sure the spaces don't drop off the bottom of the shaft as you put them into the shock. So you sort of, yeah, hold it the other way up, so you don't lose them inside the body of the shock, because then you'll get a disaster. So yeah, so instead of just dropping it in that way, tip the shock up, so you can see you've got all 3 spaces still on the shaft, and it's already going through all the O-rings and the spaces, so that way it's limited where it needs to be. There you go, exactly like that. So make sure it doesn't go flying off. How much oil is left in this puppy? That is empty. One good thing with the old shocks, 10 mil bore, you definitely don't use as much oil as the modern shocks. And our vintage racing, we never look positively upon using big bores on vintage cars, because that's just silly. So we always want to use the original shocks and shock types that were around at the time. Otherwise it defeats the purpose pretty much of running vintage. Like, just run a modern car with all the modern stuff if that's what you want. If you want to run an old car, which is definitely not as good, you're not running it to try and beat the modern cars. So you're running it for fun, for the enjoyment, bringing back the memories, reliving those old times and seeing these cool old cars on the track. They don't need to be the fastest thing in the world, which they definitely won't be anyway. Just double check I haven't completely messed that up. Awesome. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And they always look ridiculous, like the big bore shocks on the vintage cars always look ridiculous anyway, so it defeats the purpose of making them look cool and look like they used to be. Okay, what else have we got? Cool, so that's sitting there. We'll don't really need to vacuum them, but speeds the process up a bit, because always, the whole shocks always work with aeration in them anyway, so It probably just makes it a slightly more consistent build, which is nice. Okay, where my shock pliers? So let's pop all of the, set that there, pop all of these ball shock ends onto the ball studs. These shocks come with a little standoff, little plastic standoffs too, which is cool. Awesome, we'll use them. So when you pop these on, I think there's a bigger opening side, just visually. Might be an optical illusion, but if there's a bigger side, pop it on that direction so you're not expanding the smaller side. So that's those puppies ready, and then the collars which we'll use for this build, we'll pop those 440 screws in. So you see one side of the clamp is not threaded, so the bolt will just slide through easily, and then you need to tap the thread into the other side. So just get it just started, because you need them to be loose, obviously, to put on. And when you do tighten these on the shock, be careful, because there's not much material there, so that threads can strip out quite easily, and then you won't be able to clamp up the shock, which, I don't know, maybe one of the reasons why I like those Yokomo style ones, other than being sort of replica Masaki style for that event. Functionally they're, I guess, a little bit more reliable in terms of they can't slip and they can't strip. And you always know if you put the same size ones on each side, you know it's the same. Compared to the collars, you gotta measure and get them the same size sort of manually. So that's why I prefer the yoke ones for these cars generally. But if you do it properly, both work fine. Okay, how are the shocks? So that looks pretty good. Just carefully go up and down. No big. Basically, want to get rid of the big bubbles when you first fill them. So just check there's no big bubbles. Yeah, and with the limiters in the rear shocks only, you don't need limiters in the front. Obviously it can be a tuning aid in theory, technically, but found with these shocks on this car, you don't need them. These shocks in different cars, or different shocks in different cars, yeah, totally different story. But for these associated style and fan RC replicas on this car, no spaces, no limiters in the front, and those ones that we showed you, about 9mm limiters in the rear. Okay, so let's start with the rears because they're closer. Now this is the tricky bit. So I want to bring the oil up to about level, and maybe I'll just pop a drop or two on the cap just for fun. So here's the tricky bit without the bleed screws, old school style like they always used to be. You can use the associated spanner tool on these. It slides on there like that to lock the nut, but it's just plastic, so it does actually bend a bit sometimes. Probably means using too much force, but you can also use the shock pliers where it's got the little, if I can get it in there, got the little grooves that sort of lock into the hex shape. So yeah, so for these, I usually just tilt it at a slight angle. What's the best way to see this? Tilt it at a slight angle, and then have the cap mostly unthreaded, so basically the oil can push through the threads, so that acts as the bleeder. Don't really need to tilt it too much. Like the modern ones with the bleed screw usually tilt it till the air comes out the hole first, and then the oil follows and doesn't let further air in. For these it probably doesn't matter too much. You can just do it mostly straight up and down. Push the piston up, you'll see hopefully some bubbles or some oil coming out. Once it's fully compressed, then tighten up the slippery. Tighten up the cap. And at that point, if the shaft pushes out too much, it probably means you've got too much oil still in there. Otherwise, use the other associated tool. So it's got the little slot in the head to lock onto the cap, so that lets you tighten it up fully. So that's the process. You might need to repeat it. So here we see, have we got compression lock or not? We've got a little bit of rebound, but there's no actual compression lock there, so I'd be pretty happy with that. It feels awesome. So that was lucky for the first one. The hard thing is to get two the same. So I just double check that's fully tighten the cap. I think you can tighten the cap on these quite firm, because there's a little groove for the O-ring inside, so it won't it won't wreck the O-ring, or won't squash it and break it, because it has the sort of recess for it. Okay, so that's the first one. So just need to do that 3 more times and get them all perfect. Might be a bit too much oil. So yeah, you can feel there's a bit of compression lock in this one. So I think I put a bit more oil in the cap of this one that didn't come out. So I'll do basically the same process, and a little bit more oil will come out. So loosen the cap right off and push it up. Oops, not right off, almost right off. That feels good. So I've got a little bit of rebound and no compression lock. Pretty close. Got a tiny bit more rebound in one than the other, but it is super close. I don't think I'll be able to get those any closer. Okay, back to the fronts, 35 weight. Threaded right, yep, that's good. Still too much oil on that one. Heaps of compression. Pretty good. Yep, no compression lock, got a bit of rebound. Might be okay. See how the other one compares first. Way too much. Nice. Looks pretty similar actually, that's good. close. One's got slightly more, but that'll do for now. Okay, let's move these bits. Try and get rid of some of this oil. Let's degrease all this. Okay. Put all those bits to one side. Okay, mostly clean, not too bad. Now, let's finish these shocks and get them on the car. Measure the lengths in a minute all together. Make sure they're equal, left to right. Okay, goes on there. Okay. 28. 28. That's 28 for the fronts. In the rears we've got about 27. Which is maybe unusual, like more travel on the front, but I guess that was their long truck fronts and long arms concept at the time that seemed to work for them. Cool, 27. Nice. So now let's pop these on. So we've got rears and fronts. It's all the same bits though. So let's slide these on. We'll put them on opposing so we can position those on the car nicely. So let's just nip them up really gently, and just so they stay in place for now. So just enough to stop them moving. Okay, so the rears, we'll chuck these shiny silver springs on, whatever they are. Feel pretty nice. And then let's see how these blue ones sit. Feel pretty good. Probably not the worst springs to try. I'll have to give them a test on my race car. Cool, okay, so now I've got little standoffs. Let's get them on the car and we'll be pretty much done for this massively long build video. So I'll put those springs aside. Let's get rid of all of this shock related items and get the car back here. So we're just going to need a few more bolts. So I need some long socket heads, 3/4 inch. So they're going to mount the bottoms of the shocks. Okay, and actually we're going to need more than those because we need the top. So we've got nothing on the top, so there's another 4 for the top. And what nuts do we need? Maybe some flat nuts to hold them to the tower. What have I got in the front? I've got lock nuts on the front. So then let's grab a bunch of lock nuts. So I'll get 2 of those, and 2 and 2. Cool. That should do us. So the front. It doesn't slide through nice. Let's attack it with the drill again. We're so close, we're so close. Okay, I'll use that inner hole. That gives us a good droop. So this one I actually used the lock nut to get nice spacing. So I need to space the shock, make sure it doesn't hit the tower, of course. And where is our little 1/4 inch driver? And another thing that's probably best to do with the shock tower before you put it on the car, because it's a bit hard to get the hex driver into the back of it, so I'll use the good old pliers again. Okay, that's that one. This one that goes through, nice. Okay, that's the front. Let's do the back 2. So we'll use the outer holes, which probably got the same issue. Attack with the drill again. beautiful. Just beautiful. Okay, we'll use the flat nuts here, and I'll put a little bit of Loctite on the base of the thread. These are easier to get to across because no angle. Okay, so now I've got the little standoffs. I printed lots of these little replica things, but it's super cool that that comes with the fan shocks. That's convenient. Okay, let's see, front shocks. Get the bottom screw in. Don't over tighten these top nuts, just so it touches the standoff, because you still want the shock to have a little bit of play there so it's not jammed. So you get obviously free movement of the shock pivot. Cool. So go into the outer hole on the arm. Oh, yes. I'm calling this epic 2-part build video. Done. So obviously it can't hit the track yet, but that is a big chunk of the build. So of course it would need quite a few more bits and pieces, so all of your electronics build install. We need the gear cover to be fitted, and then we need the uprights, so standard RC10 uprights, knuckles, and you can use the axles. We've got some no-coast axles that work nicely. There's fan RC axles that work nicely, JC axles that work nicely. There's quite a few I think available now. And then your our beautiful turnbuckles can all pop on, so you've got the front steering, front camber ready to go on. Then you've got your body and wing, wheels, tires, and it's a race car like that puppy. So thank you for all those who got something out of this video, or both of these videos. It's super long, didn't edit out too much. I was pretty much real time for the entire build, which is many hours, so if you've watched most of it, wow. Hope you enjoyed it. It was either the most boring movies ever or the most interesting if you're super interested in all the details and all of the build steps for this. So yeah, so our 1989 associated RC10GX replica. So they've got the Masami version there, and then we've got the generic stealth car that has pretty much become famous in the RC world. Pretty cool, love it. Haven't built a full one of these for quite a while. Just been racing and maintaining this one along with the 91 version. But yeah, first time I've done an 89 build for quite a while now. So very cool, love it. If you want to ask me any other questions or have any things to talk about, always message me or email me at any time, and be happy to chat. So that's it. I'll wrap this one up for now, and hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.